Chief Advisor Professor Muhammad Yunus on Monday said the next general election can be held in between the end of 2025 and the first half of 2026 after accomplishing necessary reforms. Broadly speaking, the election date can be set between the end of 2025 and the first half of 2026, he said while addressing the nation this morning, marking the Victory Day. Bangladesh Television and BTV World broadcast the address of the Chief Advisor. In his address, Professor Yunus said he repeatedly appealed to all for arranging the election after completing all the major reforms. But due to political consensus, it may be possible to hold the election by the end of 2025 after completing minor reforms on the basis of preparing an accurate voter list, he said. And if we add to this the electoral process and the expected level of reforms in the context of the recommendations of the Electoral Reform Commission and based on the national consensus, then it may take at least 6 more months. Broadly speaking, the election date can be set between the end of 2025 and the first half of 2026, the Chief Advisor added. Stressing the need for completing reforms before holding the elections, he said each reform commission is important to implement the people's expectations for reforms, especially focusing on the Electoral Reform Commission and Constitution Reform Commission, he said, adding that the government's preparations and the date for the next elections mainly depend on recommendations of these two commissions. The big news in this context is that the Election Commission EC, with appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner, has been formed. The Commission has assumed responsibility. From now on, the responsibility has been entrusted to them to initiate the process of forming the future government. They have started their preparations. They have a lot of works to do, the Chief Advisor said. Mentioning that the first big task of the Election Commission is to update the voter list. Professor Yunus said updating voter list is always a difficult task, but now the task has become even more difficult because the country's voters did not have the opportunity to vote in the last 3 elections. The names of all those who have become eligible to vote in the last 15 years must be included in the voter list. This is a big task. After the student people uprising, there is no scope for mistakes there, he said. Nothing that many young women and girls will vote for the first time in their lives after a long time. The Chief Advisor said in the past they were deprived of their voting rights and joy. So, their voting in this election will be a memorable event. All arrangements must be ensured to make this experience smooth. My sincere wish is that the first-time young voters in this election create a tradition by voting in close to 100%, he said. Professor Yunus urged the EC and all social institutions and political parties to take various creative programs to achieve this goal. He suggested creating such a tradition that first-time voters in all elections, including local government polls, will ensure about 100% voting in all centers. If we can ensure this, no government in the future will dare to snatch the people's voting rights, the Chief Advisor added. In addition to new voters, Professor Yunus said the names of all voters must be ensured on the voter list, while special attention must be paid to removing fake voters from the list. The interim government wants to ensure the voting rights of Bangladeshi votes, he said, adding that a reliable system must be made ready to this end. If we want to further improve the electoral process and implement the recommendations of the Electoral Reform Commission, then the Election Commission will have to be given time in line with the breadth and depth of the necessary reforms, the Chief Advisor said.